The main thing I see most insurance organizations working on now is how do we govern the use of AI and Gen AI? How do we understand the best use cases and how do we make sure it's being used fairly? And that's complicated. I just don't think that we're going to wake up like 2 years from now and say, oh my gosh, this is a different industry because of AI.
Welcome to 5 Minutes, your quick dive into the wide-ranging world of insurance, technology, and leadership. I'm Miguel Edwards, and I'll be your guide as we explore these topics that are transforming not just the insurance industry, but the business world at large. Along with sharing observations I've made over the span of my career in insurance, technology, and operations, I'll be chatting with some of the brightest minds in business and leadership. Whether you're a seasoned executive or a rising star, an industry expert, or just curious about how technology is revolutionizing insurance, this is your perfect spot for your weekly dose of insights. This is 5 Minutes. Well, Mark, again, thanks for joining us. And one of the things that I want to try to reflect on here, and I ask this question of all my guests is, how did you get into the insurance industry? And you have such an amazing career, 40 plus years in this industry. And, you've been in a lot of really interesting roles, but I like to always try to pick at kind of how did you get in it? Because it's always an interesting story, typically when you talk to folks around how they fell into insurance. So why don't you give us your story?
I started not in insurance, but I started a very technical career. So I was doing, debugging mainframe operating systems and installing mainframes and doing conversions of operating systems, those kinds of things for a few years for a couple of different companies, not in the insurance space. And then I got a job with IBM, right? And I was living downtown Chicago, and I said, hey, I don't have a car. I'd love to have an account that, like CNA that's right downtown Chicago. And they said, sure, no problem. So first day I come in, they say, you're going to be on the Allstate account. You have to go up to Allstate every day, right? So I spent 10 years with an office on site at Allstate. And that's how I kind of got into insurance. And I evolved from being, more technical to more strategy, right? So at a point, it was kind of crazy. IBM had like 62 people on site at Allstate supporting them. And I led the whole SE team for a while, the systems engineering team. So, but then I evolved to more strategy. And at IBM, I ended up taking then a global role for in the marketing group. And then I quickly got involved in the global strategy. So I had the great privilege of working with many insurers around the world, really, because it was global. And I also had the great privilege of having some amazing mentors. So when I got into the global insurance group, I worked for Ginny Rometty, who later became the CEO of IBM. I worked for Joe Cooper, who later became the COO of Manulife. I worked for Bill Perroni, who is the CEO of ACORD. So I had a lot of great mentors and great experiences and got to work with a lot of different folks around the world in the industry. So that happened. Great career at IBM, but then came to an abrupt stop after I just celebrated my 25th anniversary with IBM, and then they had a big resource action, and my whole group I was all let go. And that was 2009. And I'm a man of faith, so when that happened, I'm like, you know what? I know God has something better for me. Something good is going to happen. And it did, right? That's when I got connected up with Deb Smallwood and Strategy Meets Action. And, we were a startup. So we built a nice business, right? And went through all the whole ups and downs of startups. But, we got a lot of exposure working with a lot of different kinds of entities around the insurance space. And, of course, got to the stage where Resource Pro acquired us in January 2021, and now I've been with Resource Pro for almost 5 years.
Great story, and I like the nod to your faith. I wear this obviously to pray first. There's nothing like doing a startup to really test your faith and exercise your prayers. so I know that story.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's like, okay, well, I guess we're not going to pay ourselves this month. We have to pay our bills first. We'll figure out how to get through, right? But anyway, it was a lot of fun working with Deb Smallwood and Karen Furtado and building that business. And what was great about that as well is I was able to bring my daughter into the insurance industry. right? Because when we first started SMA, she was a junior at Ohio State. We needed some help, so she came in and helped us, and then we hired her full time, and she worked for us for 12 years. And now she's at Federato.
You mentioned a little bit about the acquisition or the kind of joining Resource Pro. Talk to me a little bit about that transition. I gather that SMA, obviously strategy, very very strategic type of offerings, and then it's kind of curious to me. And then is that Resource Pro now looking to kind of really hammer more in on the strategy piece? Is that the play?
Absolutely, and we have, right? So the first interesting piece of that is. They approached us, Resource Pro approached us in August of 2020. So it was COVID, right? It was COVID time. So through the whole, due diligence process and the onboarding, like I never met a single person in person, right? And, as a matter of fact, in 5 years now, although Resource Pro has 15 offices in 6 countries around the world, I've never been inside a Resource Pro office ever. Sure. But that was, you're right. The strategy was, look, they're building an end-to-end services business for P&C, for the P&C industry. And Resource Pro serves the whole ecosystem. So agents and brokers, MGAs and wholesalers, carriers, tech companies, everybody that's involved in that ecosystem, have also serve employee benefits as well, small business and employee benefits. But that's the idea. Is we were brought in actually at the same time they acquired the Nolan Company, management consulting focused on P&C, and so together we kind of formed the front end of the value chain, if you will, and continue to do that. I mean, we've now retired the SMA brand. But I still lead that part of the business that does the advisory work and research and consulting.
So as you think about, strategy and the way it's applied in our industry, Mark, where are you seeing kind of the most emphasis, the most effort being placed in terms of developing strategies for the future? Give me an idea. And I'm open to talking, things technology, things operations, things product, distribution. Where are you seeing the most emphasis being placed in terms of the need for strategy in our industry at this point?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting things going on in the industry right now. So one huge trend is around distribution and the way that the power is really shifted to the to the distributors, right? So there's a lot of strategy around, if I'm a carrier, and in the past I always appointed lots of thousands of small agencies and worked with them, have my territory sales managers go out and meet all these folks. They still do that, but now you're working with Hub and Acrisure and Locked-In and AssureX and all these, aggregators, member organizations, big brokers. The small agencies are still there, to be sure, right? But there's a lot of rethinking in the whole distribution space. The way I think of it is, how do we reach our selected markets, right? So it's not just about the power shifting, but it's also about, as the industry moves to more and more specialization, what's the best path to the customer? How do we reach them through, maybe we never worked with MGAs before. Now we work with MGAs, right? Or wholesalers, right? Maybe we have affinity relationships or, any manner of routes to get to that selected customer. So I think that's a huge trend, is the whole, reaching customer markets and focus on distribution. Right. That would be one. Obviously, we can talk about this, more and more later, I know, but a lot around just automation and AI. Yeah. Right.
That's the topic du jour for sure. On the topic of distribution, Mark, I mean, how long has the industry and the pundits been kind of prognosticating around the death of the independent agent channel, and kind of in favor for D2C? I mean, I think for 10 years now, I've been hearing that the agent's going to go away, and we don't ever see that. In fact, I think we see growth in the channel to some extent. Where are we? Where are we with the generational tides that are shifting, the advent of technology? How is all of that impacting distribution and the kind of the continued strength of the IA market?
Great question. So we actually just did some research. We looked at the last decade, and in the last decade, for both commercial lines and personal lines, the share of the market from independent agents has increased. Like on the commercial line side, it's gone from 80% to 87% of all premium flows through independent agents, right? Now, some of that is the, you know, I won't say the shift away from captives, but even the big companies that had exclusive agents, they're multi-channel and they're going through independent agents too, right? I can remember like this is really dating me a bit, like the dawn of the internet, basically the early 90s. And I was out telling companies, hey, there's these websites and you should probably have one, things like that, right? And people started saying the big word was disintermediation. Oh, this is going to kill the agents, right? And I'm like, I don't think so. I think they're going to be around for a long time. And I'm still predicting they will. Now, I do actually think in the next decade, I think it's going to be much more difficult for the small agencies. I think you need scale in this age. And they're either going to have to join network organizations where they can tap into shared services, or they're going to have to be acquired, and then along with the generational change that you mentioned, right? Lots of these agencies have owners that are looking to cash out, and their sons and daughters don't necessarily want to run an insurance agency. Some do, but many don't. So I think that there's going to be more concentration over time here, right? It's kind of interesting. There's been an enormous amount of M&A activity in the last decade, but we've literally gone from 39,000 independent agencies in the U.S. market in 2015 to 39,000 agencies in 2025.
When you were talking about the different modes of distribution, you mentioned the MGAs and the MGAs delegated underwriting authority entities, the big formal AM Best term for it. However you slice that, talk to me a little bit about the role that MGAs now play. I mean, I'm seeing more and more MGAs come in with more and more specialization, with more and more gravity in the market. Talk a little bit about the role of the MGA and where you see that going.
Yeah, it's really fascinating to look at the whole evolution of MGAs over time, because if you think of an MGA of 20 years ago, let's say, they've always had a role in the market. And back then, their whole business model was centered on deep expertise around, risks in specific areas and relationships, right? Relationships with downstream distributors and with, underwriting partners, right? Now, there's a third leg of the stool. They have to be digitally mature, right? They have to be using advanced technologies, right? And all of the insurtechs that have emerged in the last 10 to 15 years in the MGA space, are obviously digital natives. So I think what's happened is that with the move towards more and more specialization in the industry as a whole, it plays to the strengths of the MGA model, right? And so they've literally doubled the premium that flows through that space. And it's aligned with the whole explosion of the E&S business overall, right? So, because I think last year, over $100 billion worth of premium was processed through MGAs. So, and I see that continuing, right? I mean, there's startups still every day. There's a lot of stealth MGAs, right? Because as you know, in our industry, reporting is sometimes wonky, right? So not all MGAs have to actually officially report. You can be buried under a carrier or a broker or somewhere else, and unless you're super large, you don't even have to. Nobody knows about you, right? So I think that it's still a healthy model, and they're really catalysts for innovation, right? Because they're the ones that are doing a lot of the thinking about, not only new products and coverages, but new ways to reach markets, right? You look at what's happening with embedded insurance or parametric, the MGAs are at the forefront of a lot of that.
That makes a lot of sense. And what it forces me to think about, Mark, is really, what is the future of the carrier? Is the carrier really going to be relegated to just, a balance sheet with, a lot of money and, maybe some regulatory requirements around it, and then all of the operations, all the product development, all of the technology, all of the distribution, all of that shifts to the MGA? Is that a future you see?
I think that's a possibility. It's one that's actually been discussed for a long time. But I do think, well, especially in the personal line space, I think brand matters. I think that the big brands are important to draw, draw folks in. I think the relationships they have, the capital they have. So I think they're going to be around and successful for a long time. But I can remember, ages ago where folks were predicting that they would become manufacturers only, because in that case, it's going to be like Amazon and Google, they're going to own the customer relationship. And then you just got these guys in the background that are going to underwrite the risk and manage claims and things like that. So I think we could be moving in that direction, but I can't imagine this wholesale shift where that's all there. That's all.
That makes sense. That makes sense. We talk a little bit about technology, obviously, specifically also too in the MGA space. We see a lot of MGAs bringing some very unique and proprietary technologies to the table to enable, whether it's a distribution or whether it's a product play, especially in things like parametric. With the democratization of technology, there was a time where it was a differentiator, and now it almost feels like it's table stakes. So to what extent do you see less and less differentiation from a technology perspective, and then differentiation shifting elsewhere, whether it's product innovation or maybe experience, that type of thing?
There certainly is a lot of democratization. I mean, and it's not just about all the Gen AI tools that are out there. That's part of it. But even if you look at core systems, for instance, right, there's so many great core systems out there that are easy to, easier, I would say, to implement than they have been in the past. And it kind of extends across the board. So you're right. The capabilities are there. Anybody can use them. But it ends up being, how do you use them, right? Especially, there's the foundational stuff, right? Policy billing, claim systems, how you create a unique data set that you have, or data sets that you have, how you leverage those, how you use your expertise in risk to find new ways to get insights out of that data. That's going to be where the differentiation is still. So I don't think it levels the playing field to some extent, the technology democratization, but it's still how you use it. And then that comes back to people, right? Which is one of my main themes.
It's a great talk track, because I know, a lot of what we see are organizations just trying to throw tech at problems, and it's not really to solve. It's really kind of having that strategy in terms of really what your differentiating proposition is going to be, and how. I like the how piece that you just talked about. It's not the what technology you have, it's how you actually implement and use it.
Yeah. The other thing that we've both seen is that, every industry likes to say that they're unique and they're different, but the insurance industry really is. It really is, has some very unique aspects to it that, when you have these technology firms, that are more horizontal, that are coming from other industries and think they're just going to slap on the technology and we're going to automate everything.
You did it. I had a little counter going on over here to see how long it was going to take for Gen AI to come into the conversation, and you did it. So we're in there. Let's talk about Gen AI, and I'll tell you, Mark, in the last couple of conferences that I went to has really kind of shifted my thought process. I've been kind of thinking about it as hey, I'll watch this space, and now my head is more towards it's here. In fact, I was reading an article that talked about a CEO who was lamenting the fact that he didn't take the internet seriously, and he missed an opportunity. He's not going to do the same thing with AI. To what extent, Mark, is the game really changed, or are we in another RPA moment? I remember RPA was the rage and everybody's buying RPA stuff, and then it kind of flashed in the pan, and it's still there to some extent, but it's not the transformative thing that everyone thought it was going to be. Now we have AI. Is this really going to be different? Is this going to really change the game?
AI broadly, and specifically Gen AI and now agentic AI, I think it can be and will be transformative for the insurance industry in many ways. At the same token, I just wrote a blog. It's not published yet, but I just wrote a blog titled "The Future of Insurance is Not About AI." Right? Again, back to the people theme, back to the human expertise. Right? So I think, is it going to enable us to elevate the roles of industry professionals? Yes. Is it going to enable us to get new insights, to go to next level of automation? All of the above, right? And any part of the value chain you look at, any part of the ecosystem you look at, I think there's tremendous use cases, right, for using all types of AI, right? Whether it's Gen AI, whether it's machine learning or natural language processing or whatever it is. But there's a learning curve, and it gets back to like, how do you use those technologies, right? Because it's not as simple as, well, a vendor has this great tool, so we're gonna plug it in, right? You have to find the best case in your organization. The main thing I see most insurance organizations working on now is, how do we govern the use of AI and Gen AI, right? How do we understand the best use cases, and how do we make sure it's being used fairly? And, how do we work with the regulators, and how do we ensure that we've got, the privacy issues handled, all those kinds of things, right? And that's complicated, right? To do that. So I think we're going through this period where there's, lots of excitement, lots of experimentation, lots of planning, and I do think there's great use cases already, of course, in the field, but it's going to evolve over time. I just don't think that we're going to wake up like 2 years from now and say, "Oh my gosh, this is a different industry," right, because of AI.
Good points there. You talk about that human element and learning the term now. Human in the loop now is the term that we talk about now, right? When we talk about that human element of AI and Gen AI. If I'm the innovation officer, how would you counsel me, Mark, as I think about the human in the loop construct from two different perspectives? One is how I architect my solutions to contemplate human in the loop, and as well as how do I think about preparing my workforce to participate in human in the loop?
When we think about the research that we do, I actually have a diagram that we use that, we could do all kinds of research. Maybe it's in underwriting, maybe it's research on, retail agency strategies or what MGAs are doing, the business models of MGAs, whatever it is. We have these two anchors, right? One anchor is AI and the other anchor is talent, right? Because like everything kind of gets, mixed up in there, right? They influence everything. So we've done a lot of thinking about the talent, the workforce side of things, because I think this is all about how roles are evolving and how new roles emerge in the industry. So on the one hand, there are some challenges, because as we automate more, as we use AI more, especially for entry-level kinds of activities, then what's the career path for somebody coming into the industry, right? You can't bring somebody into an insurance agency and say, you're going to be an account manager on a middle market construction account, right? You just have to build up expertise in those areas. And yes, they can be augmented by AI tools to help them learn fast. But that is one challenge, right? But I think there's more opportunity than challenge, right? Because I think ultimately it's going to move the humans into where judgment and empathy and experience are needed, and the relationships with individuals, because that part of our business is not going to go away.
Yeah. As long as there's a consumer, there's a human in the loop. And so there's got to be somebody for them to face off with, I suppose, right?
Yeah. I mean, even on the personal line side of things, life's getting more complex. Risks are getting more complex, and they need advice. Sure, there's going to be a bunch of stuff that's straight through processing that's, no human involved for simple risks. But if we look at the commercial line side, I've said for a long time, If you're a risk manager for any reasonable size company, you're not just going to press a button, to give me coverage, right? You need advice, right? And you need advisors in there, and understanding the full set of risks and how you address those from a risk transfer perspective is not easy. So anyway, I think the whole idea is that I believe it's good news for the workforce, because I think there's going to be new opportunities. There's going to be, taking the mundane away from people and helping them to elevate their roles.
One of the things that just came to mind as you were just talking about the complexity of risk is, perhaps a lot of the fear mongering or skepticism, I should really call it, not really fear mongering, is us trying to apply AI, Gen AI and agentic AI to what the industry is today, as opposed to what the industry will be in terms of complexity in the future. And then that frees up our ability to really focus in on those additional complexities. That's really kind of the thought process here. It's more of an enabler to deal with the future, not necessarily today.
Absolutely. So, I'm super optimistic about the future of the insurance industry. I think there's a lot of opportunity for growth, and AI and automation is one component of that, but fueling that is all this new data, right? So, we are instrumenting the world. We're connecting sensors and devices and computers to everything that we as an industry insure. Not just buildings and cars, but people and cows, right? Literally everything is getting connected, and we got data streaming in real time on all this stuff. So, first of all, the only way we're going to manage that is having AI to help us analyze that, right? But I think when you look at the AI, and then you look at all this data, and then you look at new models like embedded or parametric, right, or even just on-demand, insurance type models, I think we have this great potential to expand our solutions, right, to cover a lot more risks in the world. There's so much risk in the world that is not covered, or that's self-insured, whether people or companies realize it or not. That I think, for innovative companies that find the right combination there, I think there's all kinds of potential to move into new product areas and new kinds of
one of the things that excites me, Mark, about that prospect is, I don't think that we have, I guess parametric is probably the first example that I can think of, but we haven't really reinvented the insurance contract in quite some time. Does Gen AI represent an opportunity for us to completely rethink what the insurance contract looks like?
And the structure of the industry, right? Because parametric really is like almost another type of reinsurance, or can be. It can be another type of reinsurance, a new risk transfer mechanism, right? If used in the right ways. So absolutely, I think that there's so much potential to and again, it loops all the way back to my initial conversation about specialization, right? It's about understanding the unique risks of more and more granular segments of individuals or businesses or governments, and then creating the right programs, the right products to cover them, right? And we know now that probably anything we can dream up, you can probably get data, and you can probably analyze the risk, and you can probably create some product, some risk transfer mechanism to support them.
While we're on this AI theme, I want to just talk a little bit about governance, and I've got to fact check this, Mark. So I'm gonna say this for kind of as a little disclaimer. I haven't fact because I just saw it this morning on LinkedIn. Apparently, the UAE has just released an AI model where regulations will be fully governed by AI. And they're talking, it's really, so 70% faster in terms of drafting legislation and approvals. AI model trained on 100,000 legal texts, real-time analysis in 20 sectors. I mean, it just really, really kind of fascinating. Again, I have to fact check this. I don't know if this is serious, but it sounds like this is AI now, like operating a significant part of government. To what extent, as we think about governance internally, how careful do we need to be? What structures do we need to put in place so that we can think about using Gen AI correctly?
Yeah, I think it's really complicated because you can't do governance in a company without thinking about the
Mm-hmm.
company's strategy and culture and people, and because part of governance is prioritizing. How do you determine where you're going to spend your money and where you're going to allocate your people and what use cases
Right.
you're going to focus on, right? That's part of it. Part of it's how do you ensure efficient and proper usage of these tools, right? Obviously the regulatory component, but also your internal,
Mm-hmm.
protocols and regulations and things like that. So there's a lot to it. And for example, one of the things we've been talking to companies about is you have to think about the vendors that
Right.
you're using, right? And you probably need to have a checklist for them to say, what are you doing with the data
Mm-hmm.
that you're analyzing? That's data on our customers, or our exclusive data, right? How are you complying with regulate? I mean, you have to consider that whole component because there's
Sure.
some black box stuff out there, and you really need to make sure you understand and wrap that into. So there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot there. I am leery of having AI manage
Right.
itself. So
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You remind me of a conversation I had not too long ago with Anthony Habiyeb. He's with a company called Monitor, and they've got this entire kind of stack around applying governance to the third party AI tools that you're introducing into your organization, because that does present a serious risk, especially if it's black box, right? What's the explainability? How are you using this, et cetera?
I think there's going to be absolutely a need for tools and solutions to help
Mm-hmm.
manage and govern AI. No question about that. Even just let's forget about Gen AI. Even just
Mm-hmm.
machine learning models. It's a challenge to manage all of the models. If you're an organization of any size, right? What's the state of that model, right? What are the results of using the model in the
Right.
marketplace? How do you manage the
Yeah.
different versions of it and make sure they've been through the regulatory process if needed? So there's because you can easily end up with hundreds or
Sure.
thousands of models, right? And so how do you even just manage?
Yep.
So we need software to help do that, and probably AI based software. But it's still going to come back to I think there's got to be significant human oversight into the whole governance process.
What barriers to continued innovation do you see on the horizon? One of the things, by the way, Mark, that comes to me is that it feels as though, I don't know if it's just that I'm getting older, but it feels as though things are changing at a rate in which I'm having a hard time keeping up. And does that even of itself kind of represent a barrier to innovation, just the kind of the rate of change? But what are you seeing out there as things, and how are you advising your clients around how to think about overcoming various barriers to innovation and forward progress as it relates to using technology?
So everybody's
Yeah.
having trouble keeping up, right? I mean, it's my day job, right? I'm supposed to keep up with not just the technology side of things, but all the business, and it's very difficult because there's new technologies, new startups, new products
Mm-hmm.
every day, and just even trying to manage it is difficult. So the pace of change is a significant issue, and I think everybody recognizes that. So on the one hand, you have a world that's moving very fast in a lot of ways, and then on the other hand, you have an industry that's a pretty successful industry, right? Uh, with a lot of inertia, with not necessarily burning
Mm-hmm.
platforms to change. So there's a little bit
Yeah.
of a conflict there, right? There are certainly many insurance entities who are leaders and who are innovative and who recognize the need to change, but the industry as a whole, um, it's a little harder sometimes to light a fire under people. Like you
Sure.
you got to change. Like, well, Why? I'm a 120-year-old mutual. We don't really have a growth mandate.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them do, but we're profitable. We're serving our members. Do we really need to change that much, right? So I think that's one of the big challenges, really, just the industry, kind of the nature of the industry.
You mentioned, Mark, the small mutuals. I kind of want to go back to opportunity now, because there was, and the small mutuals, that's the market that I serve, the kind of the smaller carriers. And I think about the challenges that they have historically had competing with the big boys and girls, if you will. Because they just, they don't have the pockets and on almost every front when you think about it. Is there an opportunity with all of the democratization that we're talking about now? Is there an opportunity? Is there a leveling of the playing field now for these smaller carriers where, the bigger kind of mainstays might start seeing a little bit more kind of fragmentation of the business and maybe, kind of loss of their share of the pie?
If you look at, everybody has a different number, but let's say there's 2,000 P&C companies in the North American market, and 85% of them are what we would call tier 4, right? Under 125 million. And as a matter of fact, it's even skewed towards, there's so many 5, 10, $20 million single county farm mutual kind of companies, right? That serve their community. Just like for the small agents, I do think it's going to get more and more difficult for them, because I think, despite the democratization of the technology, I think scale does matter. So the challenge for the insurance industry has always been that M&A is not as easy as in some other industries. Banking has gone through a couple different waves of huge consolidation. That really hasn't happened in the insurance industry that much, because, just consolidating policy systems and claim systems and things like it, has not been easy. So, and the return for a tier 1 company to go snap up a $10 million or $20 million, it's just not there. So I'm not sure I know. I think it's going to be interesting to watch like how they survive and how they evolve over the next decade. They're not going to go away because they've been successful, been around for a long time. But there might be some different models, right? There might be more models where there's, collaboration of, 20 or 30 small mutuals, right? You have some of that, like Ontario has a group of 30 mutuals that, they formed their own kind of shared services company, tech platform that they all use. There might be more of that kind of a thing happen, especially with cloud, capabilities. That's a direction it could go, because I just think it's going to be hard if I go out 5 or 10 years to think about these companies that are $10 million, right? But they need all the same policy billing, claims, underwriting, capabilities that everybody else does. They can outsource some of the claims, et cetera. But I think it's going to be hard for them to really fully leverage technology and be as efficient as the larger guys. And then if you look at the customer side of things, the customer demographics are changing too, right? Just because you're in a local farm community, the younger generations, that doesn't mean they're going to want to walk into an insurance agent's office, right? Or that they're going to, look for a big brand. They're going to go online and try to figure out, okay, I'm running the farm now. How do I get insurance for this? So I think those dynamics are going to change, but I don't know where that's going to go for this.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. That scale is important. And when you start thinking about the cost to serve, if you can't bring that cost to serve down with scale, it becomes really, really challenging. I get it. Mark, without getting into politics, it would be difficult for us to end this conversation without talking about the recent events over the past couple of weeks here. Tariff conversations and dislocation in the bond market, which obviously impacts the insurance market tremendously. What are you seeing, or what are you thinking about as you think about the kind of some of the impacts in the markets and tariffs? I know we're talking a lot about auto repair costs going up and all of that, but beyond those simple things, what are you seeing out there that could be interesting for insurance leaders to be thinking about?
Yeah, there's a couple ways to look at that. One is I think the insurance industry is in maybe an enviable position of just kind of waiting it out because, I think we all have to wait it out and see like where does all this end with the negotiation on the tariffs with various countries and in various industries, and how does that affect the financial markets that are kind of volatile right now. I think, just because of the nature of insurance, I think there doesn't have to be any dramatic reaction right away to what do we do this week? What do we do next week? Right. To me, besides the market implications, the biggest implication is thinking about the claim side of things, right?
Yeah.
The cost of goods for repair. Because otherwise we're a services business and the tariffs don't really affect the services that much. Right. So, and honestly, pre-tariff, we go back to the last, 3, 4, 5 years with COVID and then beyond COVID, we've already been dealing with, dramatic escalations of lumber and of, parts for autos and all those things that, drive up the claim costs. And then the trial lawyer side of things, all the legal side of things as well. So the industry has been dealing with that, right? And it's been a pretty highly unusual time of rates, right? Getting huge rate increases to deal with that. So I don't know. I guess I'm just going to wait and see. And I think a lot of the industry is kind of wait and see and not have to react right away.
Well, Mark, let's wrap it up with a kind of a very general question here. Crystal ball the industry for us. 5 years from now. I would say 5 to 10 years, but who looks out 10 years anymore? It's like we don't know what the heck is going to be going on next week, much less 10 years from now. But crystal ball it for us, Mark. What are the things that you're really really focusing on, watching, and what are you advising your clients they really need to be thinking about? Let's call a horizon like 3 years. That seems like it's a little bit more reasonable. What are you advising clients they need to be thinking about into the future?
So first of all, we are looking out 10 years. We're just in about 3 weeks, we're going to be publishing an ebook that looks at the industry in 2035, right? I don't have a crystal ball. I can't predict it, right? But we're trying to think through, what are some of the big themes and what do you need to really think about, right? And the approach that I've taken like throughout my career is scenario planning, right? I've done a lot of scenario planning sessions and strategy workshops with carriers because when you take a scenario planning approach, you define kind of a whole range of scenarios that could happen when you think about the different external factors on the industry, and then you think about what would that really mean for our business, right, and our company if scenario A came to pass or scenario B, right? And what you find in going through those exercises is you end up finding that in any scenario, there's a set of kind of common elements that, what we need to do this anyway to be prepared for an unpredictable future. And so those are kind of, that's really my advice is to think along those terms. And a lot of it's, pretty simple, right? You got to be as agile as possible, speed to market, efficient. You have to have the foundation to adapt to whatever changes are going to happen, right? And you have to be curious and actively following all these things that are happening in the industry, right? You can't sit back and say, here's our business model, it's working. I don't care what's happening with MGAs or that embedded insurance thing's never going to happen. You have to understand how things are moving and what it means for you, and experiment, and then be willing to be able to adapt.
Mark, as you were just kind of wrapping that piece up, a lot harder than it seems for us, I think, in our industry, right? You talk about agility. Not our first, muscle. You talk about, that flex, the curiosity, and to your point, not resting on your laurels. Again, not a muscle we've flexed historically very, very well. So that's in and of itself is a pretty significant challenge. Just those two things.
It is. But there are leaders. Yeah. There are those that show the way, right? And then there's the fast followers that, kind of see what's happening, and maybe we should be doing that as well. So I'm very optimistic about the industry. And I think really, if I look back at the industry 10, 15 years ago and where we are today, we've made a lot of great progress, right? I mean, I can remember being in CEOs' offices in 2010 where they would say, literally, they would say, don't say the word transformation. Don't say the word innovation, right? Literally, right?
Right.
That's completely
Where
flipped,
is it?
right?
Where is our innovation
We're on a
department?
good
That's
path.
the question now, right now. Yep. I love it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Mark, thank you so much for your time. This has been great. I'm honored to have you on this show with us and all the great knowledge that you share. So I really, really appreciate you making the time for us today.
Thank you for joining this episode of 5 Minutes. If you've enjoyed our discussion, we'd love for you to share it with anyone else you think might find it interesting. Also, please subscribe on whatever podcast platform you're listening on and hit that bell to stay on top of the game with our practical 5-minute episodes. We look forward to seeing you again next week.